Welcome back everyone, it's Charlie. This will be my full House of the Dragon episode 3 video. There were a whole bunch of Easter eggs and references for Game of Thrones, so we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, I'm doing videos for all the episodes. Be sure to subscribe to get them. Careful for spoilers for the episode. If you haven't seen it yet, we'll just start at the beginning and work our way through shot by shot, talking about Easter eggs and WTF moments, starting with the beginning of the episode. So the title of the episode is called Second of His Name. It's a reference to Prince Aegon II. He'll become Aegon II if he sits on the Iron Throne eventually. There's a lot of confusion over the way they use this convention too. Like, for instance, Jon Snow would have been called Aegon VI if he'd actually sat on the Iron Throne. So right now, where he is on the show, he's not considered the successor, even though all the lords, as we learned during the episode, just assume that Aegon will be eventually named the heir and take the Iron Throne when he comes of age. So technically right now, Aegon isn't called Aegon II, he's just called Prince Aegon. When he takes the Iron Throne, or if he takes the Iron Throne, that's when he'll officially be called Aegon II. And that's why the title of the episode is sort of foreshadowing for the future of the story and the actual Dance of the Dragons, this battle over the succession. But as predicted, they did add a little bit of new footage to the actual intro scene. They kind of did the same thing that they did during the Game of Thrones original series episodes. On the Game of Thrones series, because they were using the map, they would just show the different locations that were featured during each episode, and that's how they would change the intro. But because the House of the Dragon intro is like a model of Old Valyria done as their family tree, like the blood of Old Valyria flowing through all the sigils of the members in the line of succession, the extra thing they added for this episode was like a little bloodline coming from Alicent because Aegon has been born. Now obviously she's pregnant with another child, I'll mention that in a second too, but because the child hasn't been born yet, they might add another line when the child is eventually born. Because the trailers show us a bunch of footage of the older versions of characters and there are a bunch more kids, we'll probably eventually see more lines coming out of the different sigils. The actual opening scene is down in the Stepstones, sort of setting up the whole War of the Stepstones itself. They explain it's been a 3-year time jump, and House Valyrian's men, Daemon's men, are basically fighting a slow war of attrition. Even though they have their dragons, and that's a huge advantage, they've been fighting a losing war over the past couple of years, and that's why they keep petitioning the crown for support. They don't do a very good job of showing you during this episode because it's not like a massive, huge battle, but the whole idea is that the Triarchy vastly outnumbered their forces. It was really the dragons that balanced things out for them. Love that payoff scene with Daemon coming in on Caraxes and just roasting the entire field. We see Craghas Drahar feeding one of their men to the crabs, as they kept saying during previous episodes, crying out for the Sea Snake and Daemon Targaryen, who he said would come to help him, who kind of do, but kind of do not at the same time. I think the whole idea with Daemon crushing him with Caraxes is just an idea that Daemon is there for himself. Like, the whole idea is that he's there to attain fortune and glory. The thing Corlys used to sell him on the idea of the campaign was seizing glory for himself. And so far, because they've been fighting a losing battle, he hasn't found any glory. So it's just another way to show you that even though Daemon, yes, wants to get rid of the Triarchy because the Triarchy sucks, they're basically choking trade here in this area, Daemon is really here for selfish reasons. They do use this extended scene with Caraxes to kind of show you what it's like with a dragon in battle. It's like a cool twist on the dragon battles that we saw during the original series. There were a couple CG scenes later on, like a couple of the Sea Smoke dragon scenes. I'll talk about him in a second a little bit more, where the CG wasn't so great, so maybe they'll polish that in the next couple of weeks or when they eventually release a Blu-ray for it or something like that. And if you couldn't tell, Caraxes actually has a malformed body, but when he's in the air, that doesn't matter. Like, he's just as vicious as any other dragon, if not more so. So that's why it looks like he takes off in such a weird way. The soldier also makes fun of Craghas Drahar for being a bastard, his father for being a bastard. It does make me wonder if there was something special going on with his bloodline. Like, is he part of the Valyrian bloodline somehow? Is he distantly related to the Targaryens? There's a lot of theories on that, but they kind of go nowhere during the episode. I think the way they just set this up, the whole idea of second sons, is that they wanted to show you that Daemon was searching for glory to prove himself because of the way that he's viewed in the line of succession by the rest of the realm right now, and Craghas Drahar is trying to do the same thing too. So that's why Crabfeeder is leading this army trying to seize this area for himself. He does have grayscale, and his mask is also a cobbled together version of a Sons of the Harpy mask. And for those of you wondering, because Daemon hauls him out, people are wondering, if you're touching someone who has grayscale, does that mean that Daemon now has grayscale too? Is that going to kill him eventually? I think if that had been the case, like if he'd actually contracted grayscale just by touching him here, they would have zoomed in on the part of his body that was actually touching Crabfeeder. And I think he would have actually tried to hide the fact that he was touching Crabfeeder. And because he didn't do that, I think they're just trying to tell us that no, he did not get grayscale. Then when we go back to King's Landing, we find out that Aegon II is having his second birthday, and that's how much time has gone by. Like, it's a 3-year time jump, but that gives you enough time for Alicent and he to get remarried, then for her to have Aegon and for him to have his second birthday. The person Otto Hightower is talking to is his older brother Hobart Hightower, the current Lord Hightower down in Old Town right now. And it's just meant to set up the idea that pretty much all the lords of the realm just expect Viserys to eventually name Aegon the heir. Like, oh, well, of course the boy is going to sit on the Iron Throne. Like, all the lords of the realm take it as a foregone conclusion, even though they just swore fealty to Rhaenyra being the heir. The funny thing about this is that George R.R. Martin said that he based this event on something in real-life European history where a similar thing played out, where like a current king named his daughter the heir. The lords of the realm at the time, and this is happening in real life, went along with it, but then a little while after the king died and his daughter was supposed to take the throne, the rest of the lords got together and said, you know what, we're going to pretend like we didn't do that. So a lot of what happens during the episode is Princess Rhaenys being correct, telling Rhaenyra in the previous episode, basically nobody's going to go along with this, no one is going to take you seriously no matter what you do. And sure enough, even Jason Lannister, who's courting her, doesn't think that she's going to be queen. We meet Tywin Lannister, Jason Lannister's twin, informing Viserys about what's going on with the war in the Stepstones. But obviously the connection here, the twins, being the connection to Jaime and Cersei being twins. Pretty sure they're not brother-wiving. When he mentions Bloodstone, that's just one of the central areas of power inside the actual Stepstones. Right now in this part of the timeline, Tywin has become the current master of ships in the Small Council, replacing Corlys Velaryon, who left, obviously, a couple years ago to start the War of the Stepstones with Daemon. It is cool to see so much of House Lannister during this episode, and it's just a cool twist on what the House Lannister becomes later in the timeline. When we see Rhaenyra, she's back in the Godswood reading that same type of history book that she was reading earlier, reading about Nymeria and the 10,000 ships. The song the minstrel is playing is called The Dragon's Eye. It's meant to be kind of a lament, like the events of the song are basically a metaphor for what will eventually happen in the future.
She fled with her ships and her people, her heart broken.
The scene gives you a good idea what the tensions are like between Alicent and Rhaenyra. Like, their relationship deteriorated quite a bit over a couple of years. Like, she was betrayed by the remarriage, and now that the baby has been born, Prince Aegon, Rhaenyra is on the outs with her father and with Alicent, even though both of them separately want to patch up their relationships with her. Alicent is also very, very pregnant with her second child. The second child is a girl named Helaena Targaryen. Because there's going to be a year time jump for episode 3, I'm assuming we'll see that baby in episode 3. The whole first half of the episode is pretty much exclusively devoted to this hunt in the Kingswood, and it gives you a lot of flashbacks for Robert Baratheon and the boar's hunt that he went on, because there are a lot of similar moments that kind of play off of what happened to Robert. Like, you have Viserys drowning himself in his wine. Robert Baratheon was poisoned by Cersei, or on the command of Cersei, with his wine slowly over time, and basically died because of the boar wound. Rhaenyra almost dies because of a boar wound. Even though someone isn't poisoning Viserys, like, that's not what's actually going on here. His health is just slowly deteriorating. Blame that on all the sister-wiving in their family. Speaking of which, if you notice he's wearing gloves, that's because he has a couple less digits on his hand. Remember the maggots from last week's episode? Yep, didn't go so well. They ended up having to take those digits off. You have to imagine, if his health is declining so quickly in the ensuing years, what it's going to be like in future episodes before he passes away finally. Like, when we see him in next week's episode, a year later, he's probably going to be way worse. Part of the idea, too, with him drinking all the wine, I think, is to numb the pain. Like, he just has this dull pain that he's been living with all the ailments all over his body. Like, even though he's covered, we don't see all of the ailments. He's not drinking just to get drunk or because he feels sorry for himself. He's drinking, basically, to numb the actual physical pain that he's in. We meet a bunch of the other great houses during the episode. I already mentioned the Lannisters. Keira Lannister seems like their mother, just based on her age. When she talks about Lady Joanna being captured, she's talking about Joanna Swan, who was captured in the Stepstones, but her father, here's the funny thing, because it's a big metaphor for what's happening with Rhaenyra. Joanna Swan's father refused to pay the ransom money, so she was basically just sold off to a pleasure house, which Lady Lannister here implies is eventually going to happen. But the big twist is that Joanna, after her father refused to do anything to help her, basically became this incredibly powerful person called the Black Swan in Lys. So it's sort of an example of this woman kind of cast off by her family that nobody cares about, but that made a name for herself and became very powerful in her own right. And you can see the obvious connection to what's happening with Rhaenyra during this episode. Like, she feels like her father doesn't care about her. Like, oh, you just can't wait to get rid of me. And then by the end of the episode, finding this resolve, like, in her station and becoming the heir to the Iron Throne. Also, Joanna, eventually called the Black Swan, eventually Rhaenyra is called the Black Queen. We meet the rest of House Strong, important characters going forward. Lionel Strong, the head of their household, is the Master of Laws right now. The son with the walking cane is Larys Strong. He's called Larys the Clubfoot. He was just born with a clubfoot, obviously, as the name implies. We meet his other son, Harwin Strong, who's very healthy and part of Daemon's gold cloaks later in the episode as well. He's the one that kind of looks at Rhaenyra like, hey, what's going on? Viserys jokes about Rhaenyra marrying his son, Harwin Strong. That'll be a big thing in the future. I don't want to get too far ahead of the story. We'll talk about that when it actually happens. Because things do get pretty spicy, but like a lot of the people that they mention here during this episode become much bigger characters in future episodes. But the other big thing during this first half of the episode is Viserys forcing Rhaenyra to get married, but trying to find the best way to do that, with a little bit of help from Alicent. Like, you have to make her feel like she's the one making the choice. Which they pay off at the end of the episode. Like, okay, fine, strengthen your claim to the Iron Throne. Choose whoever you want to, but you do have to choose someone. They did have that funny moment with Jason Lannister, like he was trying to spit some game at her, just completely shut him down. Why would we need a dragon pit at the Rock? That was meant to set up the idea that he expected that she would not be queen, so she would be taking her dragon to the Rock where they would live. They set up the history, the special ceremony of this white stag that they're supposedly going to kill, and it's going to be this big portent of right to rule, this sign of royalty. What they basically tell him is that they used to do this, use this as a symbol for right to rule before the time of Aegon the Conqueror. And in this area where they're at here, it was ruled by Harrenhal, who is the person who built Harrenhal. That's why it's called Harrenhal. Maybe we'll get some of the history of Westeros from before Aegon's conquest later in the series too. It is cool to get those little history lessons here and there. Criston Cole chases Rhaenyra into the Kingswood, sort of setting up their relationship, being a little bit closer. He claims that she's responsible for him making it on the Kingsguard, like making his dream a reality, so he owes her everything. You can clearly see she has this huge crush on him. Probably not going to end well for either of them. Also, don't want to get too far ahead of the story, because obviously he's a big character going forward. When Rhaenyra suggests that her father can worry himself to death, the funny thing is that's kind of what's actually happening right now. Like, he's slowly kind of worrying himself to death. Even though he's not dying of worry, he's just dying of his ailments over time slowly. Be careful what you wish for. In the cool moment of foreshadowing is when Criston Cole says that the realm will accept her as queen because they won't have a choice. Obviously, during the Dance of the Dragons, they will have a choice because of Aegon II. Then they have that callback moment to Robert Baratheon versus the boar, where Rhaenyra almost gets killed by her boar, but he saves her, and then she just goes to town on it. You could also look at the imagery of her being covered in blood and then surveying everything in the Lords of the Realm from above here, being sort of a metaphor for what's going to happen during the Dance of the Dragons. And I think the whole idea with the brown stag versus the white stag is that if her father, Viserys, had seen the white stag and killed the white stag, that would have been a symbol to him that he needed to name Aegon the heir instead of his daughter Rhaenyra, but because he doesn't see the white stag, it isn't seen as a sign of a right to rule, so he doesn't change his mind. Rhaenyra is still the heir, at least currently. Hammered home by the idea that Rhaenyra herself actually does see the white stag, like she sees this right to rule and lets it go free. So this meant to just crystallize her path forward for her. She has a much better idea of how she's going to tackle everything going forward. Which is why when she walks back into camp, she basically doesn't bother looking at anyone who's staring at her covered in blood. Really cool lore Easter egg here too. When Viserys is getting drunk arguing with Alicent here about whether or not he made the right choice in making Rhaenyra the heir over Aegon II, he says that few in their family line have been dreamers. He's talking about dragon dreams, being born with the ability to see visions of the future, like Daenerys the Dreamer. Daenerys also had visions in the House of the Undying. Those were kind of like her dragon dreams. Dragon dreams are just a way of describing having visions of the future. There are many characters on Game of Thrones that do that in several different ways, like Bran has visions of the future because he's one of the last Green Seers. Melisandre also claims that she does the same thing, has visions of the future by staring into the flames, getting the visions from the Red God. When Alicent's father Otto says that her son Aegon is going to be king one way or another, like, the end of the road is clear despite what you want to happen. Even though she wants to be friends with Rhaenyra, he's basically telling her the realm wants Aegon as the next king. They'll never accept Rhaenyra. Just highlighting how things are spinning out of control, like they're headed on this collision course and nobody really sees a way out of it. Their whole conversation over who has the stronger claim to the Iron Throne is literally what happens during the Dance of the Dragons itself, with half the realm and the Greens believing that Rhaenyra is trying to steal the Iron Throne from Aegon II because it should be his by right, and the other half of the realm thinking that Aegon is usurping the throne from Rhaenyra because the king already named her his successor. Alicent also sets up the idea of Rhaenyra choosing someone herself and setting up the idea of her marrying Laenor Velaryon, which Lionel Strong was talking to Viserys about, like, have her marry Laenor, he's of pure Valyrian blood, it'll strengthen the bloodline and solve a whole bunch of problems for you. Because there's this huge rift with House Velaryon because he basically threw them onto the bus when he decided to marry Alicent. He needs to heal that, and there's all these problems that he has with Rhaenyra trying to figure out who she's going to get married to. So all he needs to do is have her decide to marry Laenor Velaryon and make it think that it's her choice. We only get a little bit of him in this episode, so I won't talk about him too much other than him being one of the other dragon riders. But there's this last moment that he has with Rhaenyra when she comes into the room and he talks about her deciding for herself, like, you need to pick a husband, but you do have to pick one sooner or later. When he says he's wavered before, but he won't do it again, he's talking about the bastard that he supposedly had. There's a rumor that he had a bastard named Trystane Truefire. They might wind up introducing that character later in the series, but then we actually go down to the Stepstones, to Dwarfstone, the place that they were talking about, like, send support to Dwarfstone. That's the place where they are, basically. And they set up the whole idea that they are on their last legs, like, we're only going to last for a little while longer, even though we call for more ships from House Velaryon, they're not going to get here for weeks. I think the whole idea is they want to show you that the king's support was already on its way when the letter arrived, so it gets there just in time, but also Daemon's gambit works out, and they're able to take care of Crabfeeder and most of his forces by the time the rest of the support gets there. We meet Corlys Velaryon's oldest son Laenor for the first time, and his younger brother, Vaemond. This is Corlys' younger brother. In the books, he was his nephew, so they just kind of changed that for the show. This whole scene with Vaemond trying to throw Daemon under the bus is just trying to set up the future of their relationship together, like it's going to be very contentious. It's not like they become best friends after this or anything like that, like this sentiment between the two of them continues. The whole reason why Daemon attacks the messenger, who's doing nothing more than just giving him the message to say that the king is going to send them support so that they won't die, is because Daemon feels like a failure and he feels like he can't go home, so to speak, as a failure. The whole idea behind this entire campaign in his mind was, yes, like they got to get rid of the Triarchy and Crabfeeder, but really he was doing it to attain all this glory in the eyes of the rest of the realm, to prove his worth to the rest of the lords, basically. And the whole thing with Daemon trying to kill Crabfeeder by pretending to forfeit under the white flag of submission, the way the showrunner, the way that Matt Smith talked about it, is that it was sort of like a last-ditch suicide attempt on his part. Like, they want to show you how Daemon can think on his feet, he's really good in a fight, but they're also kind of playing it as if he doesn't care whether or not he dies. So a lot of the way that he fights during this battle is meant to inform a lot of the battle choices that he makes during the actual Dance of the Dragons war. The actual battle scene was actually pretty cool, with him attacking all those soldiers by himself, in the way they sort of played it so that he distracted all the Triarchy's forces so that they weren't paying attention to what the rest of House Velaryon was doing, their army basically coming up on the beachhead, and what the dragons were doing. He basically pulled all the Triarchy's forces here into this tight little area, making it way easier for Laenor to roast them with Sea Smoke. And relatively speaking, Sea Smoke is a little bit smaller than Caraxes, but still pretty large dragon, but overall not one of the bigger dragons. And that's mostly just because Sea Smoke is younger than the other dragons. We haven't seen the older version of the character yet, but Laena Velaryon would also be a teenager at this point. You see her in the background of these trailer shots here. She's also a dragon rider as well. I don't want to talk too much about her, though, before they actually introduce the older version of the character. She'll be a lot of fun in the future, like the older version of her character is a lot of fun. R.I.P. to Crabfeeder, was hoping we'd learn some secret about him, maybe some secret Targaryen bloodline or Valyrian bloodline in there. Nope, looks like they're going a different way with that. But I think the whole idea with this battle is that Daemon proves to himself and to everyone else that he is worthy. One of the things that they set up at the beginning of the episode, though, between Daemon and his dragon Caraxes, that they kind of pay off a little bit in the end of the episode, is the whole idea that the dragon is so closely bonded to him on this kind of psychic level that it feels the wounds that he gets just the same as he does. So like at the beginning of the episode, when he gets hit with the arrow, Caraxes screams out in pain, and during the final battle, he's hit with a couple arrows. You can hear dragon cries in the background, even though they cut a lot of the audio out, so you don't hear them quite as clearly. You can also make a lot of Littlefinger jokes during his plan of attack here, like Chaos is a ladder, Daemon using a lot of the chaos and the surprise here to try and kill as many people as possible as he gets to Crabfeeder to get him. But if there's any other Easter eggs and references that you spotted during the episode that I didn't mention during the video, just write them below in the comments. And what'll happen is I'll post my episode 4 trailer video next, and then I have a couple big bonus videos planned this week too. Everyone click here for that episode 4 trailer video. I'll update the link as soon as I post that, and click here for all my House of the Dragon videos. Thank you so much for watching, everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.